Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled To Outsource or Not to Outsource, That is the Question. Our presenter today is Michael Linzar, who is the founder and CEO of Reinteractive. Michael is well known in the Ruby and on Rails community as a blogger. He is also the author of Mail, which is the Ruby email handling library, and he's known for his extensive work on the Rails Action Mailer component. Michael is the author of the book Why Rails and will be launching his next book, Confident Software, early next year. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. So thank you everyone for joining. It's my pleasure to be your host over the next probably 40 minutes or so. So the title of the talk is To Outsource or Not to Outsource. That is the question. Definitely leaning heavily on my friend Will Shakespeare. And it's subtitled How to Work with Clients and Stakeholders Without Losing Your Mind, which is definitely something that can happen in some complex projects. And I have witnessed from various different angles, both being the outsourcer and the outsourcee, and also working with other clients in like advisory positions where I've seen outsource roles go wrong or go right and all sorts of things. So first off, who am I? As Rochelle said, I founded Reinteractive in 2010. We've grown to around 40 staff, 30% average growth. We actually grew about 54% last year, and for a services company, that's quite good, given that you have to hire staff to do it. We have delivered hundreds of successful projects, worked from clients from sole traders all the way up to multinationals. Got Why Rails as a book, and Confident Software is being released soon. Started and sold a couple of software businesses, and I'm author of the Mail Gem. Now, the Mail Gem is the thing that Ruby on Rails uses to send all of its emails. So if you've ever received an email from Airbnb or Twitter, that's actually my software. It's been downloaded about 100 million times. So I have experienced software development from many angles, and hopefully I can give you some of my hints and tricks about that and how to make projects succeed. How to interact, well, you can ask a question at any time. Obviously, that's my Twitter handle and the Reinteractive company and Facebook sites, which will be on the last slide as well. So first off, why are you here? You might have just been told by someone to come along, or you actually have a software project that you're trying to deal with and you don't know how much you should outsource or insource. I'm going to give you some tips on both ways. Now, bear in mind that obviously we are an outsourcing company. So I've tried to make this talk as balanced as possible, because the truth is outsourcing is not always the best solution. And we tell our clients this many, many times. In fact, I think I've lost more projects at that stage than I've won, because I've simply told the client that it's not the right way for them to go on something. And I'm quite happy to do that, because at the end of the day, if our clients don't succeed, we don't succeed. So you've probably got a Rails project or you've got a software project. You're not sure how much you should hire staff to maintain it or how much you should outsource it. And this is going to help you make that decision, I hope. So first off, before you're looking at outsourcing and insourcing, you need to have a look at what software project or what type of software project you actually have. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's two broad types of software project. There's a fixed system, or there's one with constant change. Now, a fixed system project is one that isn't necessarily going to be modified all the time. So it might be a system that handles an internal business process, and that business process, once it's defined and running, isn't really going to change a great deal over the months or years that you're going to be running that project. I mean, sure, there'll be updates and tweaks and fixes, but it's not like you are selling this product to clients and you need to constantly update it. So that's a sort of a fixed system project. And when I say fixed system, no system in the world is fixed. You can't have a fixed system sort of by definition, because if the system's fixed, the world around it is going to continue to change anyway. So the system's going to have to adopt at some point. But when I say fixed, I mean predominantly unchanging. You know, a blog is a great example of this. You've got your company website. Sure, it changes a little bit. You have to update content, you do things like that, but that's usually done within the system itself. But the system as a whole doesn't change all the time. So a blog is a fairly fixed system. You wouldn't necessarily have an internal team managing that system, because well, they'd get bored. Whereas if you were running a software as a service product, say Facebook for cats or something, that would be something that you'd have to constantly change, and that would what we'd be called a constant changing project. So constant change projects are the other type, and they are the ones that are always having to update, always having to implement new features. The whole business is the project. The project constantly has to offer more to its users to actually engage them and keep them part of the program and keep them online. Also, remember when I say constant change, I'm not talking about content here, because content is usually part of the system. So the ability to make a blog post on a blog site isn't something that would be counted as constantly changing, because you're still using the same software. You're just logging into a defined area and updating a blog post. That's a lot different to having that Facebook for Cat site where you now have to implement a new cat tracking feature, which would obviously be a whole heap of code and be a big update to the system. So constantly changing projects are those which have clients that are demanding new features, and those features need to be implemented for the continued viability of the project. The fixed system projects are those which may have changing content, but don't have a demand for continued feature changes. Or if the demand is there, it's sporadic, and it can be done once a year or twice a year or something like that. So they're the two types of systems we're talking about here. Now, primarily, when you're looking at in-housing something, you would never in-house the development of a fixed system. There'd be no point, because you would hire your developer, say $100,000 a year, and they would build the blog in the first month or two, and then they'd do nothing for the rest of the 8 months or 10 months. So this talk is primarily talking about the constant change projects, okay? Those projects that are always needing to be updated for their own viability in terms of the features that they're delivered. So this talk's going to talk about that, because the fixed ones, you would always outsource. You'd never try and in-house a fixed project. I mean, by in-house, I mean hiring staff dedicated to the project. You might still project manage in-house a fixed system by getting a freelancer in or something like that, but getting that freelancer in would be considered outsourcing because they're not on your staff, if that makes sense. So why would we in-house something? Well, there's quite a few reasons for that. Let me just click here. Good. So the reason we in-house something, I've got 5 really broad but very compelling reasons why we would in-house a project. And this is something that you should definitely look at. And by the way, this whole talk is based on a blog post I've done, which summarizes all of these points, and it's on our website. And after the seminar, we'll make sure that you have access to that blog post, or we'll put it in the chat shortly so that you can follow along later or refer to it later. Actually, the reason I even wrote this blog post is I had a client come to us and say, look, we really want to use reinteractive. I need to talk to my board. The board's thinking about doing it in-house. Can you give us some reasons why it would be good to in-house or not? And I gave them this balanced review, and it turns out that they're going to in-house it. So they actually took all that data and realized that the sort of system they were building would benefit from in-housing. So what they're doing now is they're going to in-house it, but then they're going to use us to help supplement their in-house team. And for them, that was actually the right decision. So by writing this blog post, I basically didn't get a couple of $100,000 sale. So there you go. It's the way it works sometimes. But the flip side of that is that that customer now obviously really trusts us, and we can go in there and help them with their demands when they really need our help, you know, when they don't have enough work. So the first main reason that people want to in-house is control. They want to know that the developer that they want is on the project at the time they want, in the space they want, and they want to be able to have full control over that developer's destiny. Look, this is a very valid requirement. However, it's probably got too much importance, because the truth of the matter is that when you hire a development team, that development team is going to be with you for maybe a year or 2 or 3, and then they're going to move on anyway. It's quite rare for developers to stick around past 3 to 5 years in projects, because they want to keep learning. They want to keep doing the new thing and expanding their horizons. So this can be a bit of a what's the right word for it? A misnomer, because the truth is, in-house or outsourced, you can still control the team and know what you're getting and what you want to look after. But control is a good factor. You know, you want to build the team up and you want to make sure you've got the right technology there and all that sort of stuff. Nothing beats in-housing if you want to have that control. The second main reason would be control of intellectual property. Now, depending on who you are outsourcing with, this is a very valid reason. I've seen clients who have outsourced their development to some second-tier countries, let's put it that way. I don't want to name names specifically, but where the development rate is a lot cheaper than what they could get in Australia or the US or Europe, England, and that sort of thing. And the intellectual property has been almost impossible to control. The reason that Reinteractive primarily hires from Australia, America, and other countries like that, and New Zealand, is that those countries have very, very, very robust intellectual property and moral rights consent laws in place. And by moral rights consent is where you get a developer to sign an agreement that says that anything that they develop while under contract with you belongs to the company, and therefore through the agreements the company has with the client belongs through to the customer. So our terms of use, for example, have very clear things about intellectual property and moral rights consents, and all of our staff sign those agreements and do all that sort of stuff to make sure that that IP vests in the right person or the right entity. Some of the cheap development that you can get out there, it's a bit vague. And I don't know about you, but one thing I often say to a client is, it's fine that you're outsourcing to that country, but have you considered being able to enforce an intellectual property suit into that country and what that would take? And usually that handles that right then and there. So control of intellectual property is a big reason to insource within your own company. And but you could also do this another way. You could have your own internal team working on the very highly critical parts of your intellectual property, yet have an outsourced team helping build the surrounding fringe products. A couple of our clients do that, and they use our team to supplement their internal team. So intellectual property, good reason to do it. Another good reason is long-term maintainability. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, we had a client that was looking to build a project or have it as a externally built project by us. And one of the concerns that they had, which I agreed with, was that they were building a product that was constantly changing, and they needed to make sure that they had someone in-house who could maintain that and continue to maintain that and be that on the payroll within their own company. And we agreed with them and we worked out a solution. Basically, we started the project, we got it running over the first 4 to 6 months. We got it launched within that time, and within that 4 to 6 month window, they hired someone to come on board. And that actually worked out very well for them, so that they got the project built by our team with all the benefits of outsourcing, and then they hired someone to look after it moving forward, which saved them money in the future. There is a few ways that you can do this. Again, it depends on how much the platform you're building or the software you're building is intended to change over time. And it just comes down to whether or not you need that balance of, well, am I going to spend $100,000, $150,000 a year, including on costs on a developer to maintain this? Or are we going to pay a outsourcing company, be it Reinteractive or anyone else, to come in as needed to do that development work? And I mean, to give you an idea, if a developer costs about $150,000, including on costs, and with that I'm talking about leave and wages and all that sort of thing, then you're looking at that equaling at least about half a year of development from one of our team. So you could get one of our developers for more than half the year, or about half the year, for about the same price as you can get someone on full time. So then you need to look at that and go, well, is that person going to be busy over that whole time? And that runs straight into the next point, which is cost. So there's many ways that you can maintain an app. You can get month-to-month software agreements and code agreements. Many companies offer this. I mean, we do, and everyone else does. We have our code care service and our ops care service, which do maintenance on that very reason. And that's actually an interesting point. Operations, outsourcing operations of the platform is a really good example of where you'd probably want to always outsource, because say you have a website or a web application and it's running, that application will need an operations team to make sure it stays running. Now, if the operations team, say you hire someone on board, so you hire someone, 150 grand a year, something like that, maybe 100 because you get someone out of uni, including leave and holidays and sick and health and everything else. And you get that person on. If they're doing their job well and they're an operations unit, they should basically do themselves out of a job over about 3 months. And the platform should be running nice and stably and it not really have any faults, and they'll be bored out of their brains because there's only so much you can do on making something get maintained. The flip side of it also is that one person would have to be responsible for the 24/7 support of that application. So that one person's going to be woken up at 3 a.m. if it goes down. If that person goes on leave, who's going to look after the site if it crashes? If that person resigns, what do? You've then got a completely custom build that only one person knows how to do, and then you have to find someone else to take it over. So that's one of the reasons why Reinteractive created our ops care service. And I mean, other companies do this too, of course, but we made our ops care service because we can offer 24/7 follow the sun support. And our teams are dealing with 40 odd Ruby on Rails applications, which are highly, doing, each team works on about 40. So they have all of these applications that they're looking after, and they can get common support sections and know that they fixed this thing over here. So now they can proactively fix this thing over in another application to make sure everything's humming along. So that's a good example where, and you can do that for a fraction of the cost of hiring someone. So that's a good example where outsourcing really works. Another good example though, where in-housing it would really work, is you have a developer on board because you're constantly upgrading features, you're constantly delivering to your clients new upgrades into the platform. And when I say clients, I mean anyone that uses the platform that you provide. So you're constantly upgrading this thing, and you really need to be delivering constantly. Now, if you're delivering constantly, then it would mean that you'd need to hire someone like us, 2 developers, say, for the whole year. Well, unless you've got a really big project, then that doesn't really make sense, because you're basically buying 2 developers full time for years, and that's going to cost you, double at least what it would cost for you to do that in-house. Having said that though, if you're only planning that sort of development for 12 months, well, you can't really just hire someone in-house and then fire them after 12 months. It doesn't really work that way. So if it's a short amount of sprint you're doing, you want to start to focus on outsourcing that. But if it's a long-term game for the company, then getting a competent development team in-house makes a lot of sense financially moving forward. Just understand that you're committing to that team for many years if you want to make that a good team. The next big reason to do it in-house is the team fit and vision. Obviously, if you have an in-house team, it's much easier to create a culture and a vision within that team than if you're bringing in an outsourced company. And while we try and fit into whatever team culture and vision is in the clients we go into, obviously it's never going to be exactly correct, because we have our own culture at Reinteractive, and that might not work. But again, it's a balance. How much are you going to be spending on this project? How much development do you need on this project over the next, say, 5 years? And getting an idea around that, and then going, well, okay, really, we only need about a year's worth over the next 5 years. That would be an outsourcing thing, no brainer. But if you need someone on deck for the next 5 years, full-time doing development, well, you're going to in-house that. So they're the main 5 reasons why you would outsource, they're the main 5 reasons why you would do it in-house. Now what I want to do is show you some of the reasons why you would outsource a project. And if there are any questions, feel free to ask away and I'll answer away. So reasons to outsource. The biggest one that I've found that clients love the most is time to market. You can come to a company like Reinteractive or any other hosting development company, and you can have a team rolling within a week or two. And it's a competent team. It's a team that knows what the other team members are doing and thinking and can coordinate therefore, and can move things forward in a way that you won't be able to do if you start recruiting. One of our clients that we built a project for, and it was actually Red Balloon, when they were starting a new project, they gave us a quote, but one of the big things that they said in their case study was that Reinteractive allowed them to get to market about 6 months earlier than if they'd started hiring a whole internal team, which makes a lot of sense. So by going to a outsourced company, you can hit the ground running, you can deliver it, you can get it done straight away. And even if you are going to do it in-house, you're still probably better starting with an outsourced team and then bringing on your in-house resources as the project's moving along, because then you can get that done and make sure that the in-house team know how everything works and moves forward. Similarly, with time to market, you get the best now. So you can find a group that are working on multiple projects and have worked on many, many projects, as opposed to maybe one at a time. So our developers, for example, over a year are going to work on multiple different projects all the time, and they're always reviewing each other's code on different projects. So they're exposed to a huge amount of development, and that pushes them up towards the top in their field. In fact, our developers never, when they leave Reinteractive, they never have a problem finding work. And they usually go on to be team leads or project managers or CTOs in other companies, because they do get exposed to so much technology. So using our developers or using our outsourcing companies' developers definitely helps on this aspect. It also means that when you are, say you've got a developer and they know about project X, but don't know so much about technology Y, and your platform is going to use technology Y, that developer can then go and talk to the other 20 or 30 developers in the company and say, hey, who knows about technology Y? Is that going to work with technology X? Is there anything I should be aware of here? Where can I go and get some quick training on that? And they can use each other to get that data. It's a lot more efficient doing it that way than using our friend Google to figure it all out. The next main reason is experienced project management. So at Reinteractive, every project we launch has project management built into the cost. We don't make it an optional extra, because we found that only projects with the competent project management actually succeed. So our project managers, I mean, right now, our main project manager, I think, is on 9 different projects, or touching 9 different projects in terms of scheduling and all that sort of thing. We have our development manager and our project manager, and they're all controlling about 9 different things. So it's about 4 or 5 each. So they know how to get a lot of things done, and they've seen many different projects, and they know where it's going to fail and where it's going to succeed. And that experienced project management really does help. Even if you, that project management point is critical if you're going to in-house something. So you need to know that you can project manage an in-house team. And also where this comes up is if you outsource to some cheap development labor, you need to know that you can project manage that cheap labor. Maybe you want to outsource and you just go, well, I'm just going to outsource to this development agency over in the Middle East or something, and they're going to provide developers. Well, you better really know how to project manage that team, otherwise it's going to end in tears. So you really want to, when you are looking to outsource, make sure you find a company that's going to project manage it and has a track history of successfully project managing projects, and talk to some of their clients and get some data on previous jobs and previous clients. The next one is reducing pain. So this is all about when you outsource a project, you can ramp up and ramp down the number of developers as you see fit. So we have a client right now that has 6 of our developers on the project at one time. They needed to ramp down to 5. We removed one of the developers, and now they're spending 1/6 less than they were the week before. If you are hiring your own team, that's very, very hard to do. You can't just fire and hire. on a weekly basis. So it is, a point, and it is something to think about when you are building an in-house team. You want to build your in-house team up to the point where they handle what I call the base load of development. So your in-house team should handle all the stuff that you're just going to expect to do on a routine day-to-day basis. And then what you want to do is use an outsourced team to spike to handle some extra traffic and extra load and then ramp down again. Now, the outsourced team will never be quite as efficient as the in-house team because they don't touch the code base all the time. However, being able to spike like that means that your in-house team can keep focusing on what they're doing. Next one is easier hiring. Now, believe it or not, this is a true thing. We've had clients say one of the reasons that their developer joined the company was that the project was built by Reinteractive. And they looked at the code base and saw that it was very clean, that it had lots of tests, that they were all happy about it. And they thought, well, yeah, this is a good project. The client obviously wants to invest in technology and make it work. And that's why they hired Reinteractive. And we can see that it's good and we like it. So that's a valid thing that at least 3 of our clients have mentioned to us now. So when you've built a very big project, for example, and you've hired an outsourced team to put all the effort in to build a massive part of the project, then you can use the highly technical and super senior developers that we can provide to do all the hard work, the architecture, the setting up the development. That also means that when you go to hire, you don't necessarily have to hire a senior developer at some huge amount of money. You could hire a more mid or even junior level developer and have them start on the project with our team and get up to speed on how to manage that project. We also offer things like code care, where our developers can stay working on the project for 10 hours a month. And some of our clients use that to do code reviews on their internal development team and to work with the internal team and help them get up to speed. So easier hiring is a good reason to outsource at least the initial part of the build. Another one is best practices. Oops, there we go. Another one is best practices. This is where your internal team is only going to be talking to a few people, maybe some of their friends that are around, or if there's 2 developers in your internal team, then they'd be talking to each other. So at Reinteractive, for example, we have a whole coding style. We have requirements about code that goes into the code base, that it must be looked at by another team member before it goes to the client, that it gets reviewed, that every piece of code that's written has some coverage test around it. So these are all best practices to make sure that the code we deliver is as bug-free and as capable as possible. So this isn't always in with an internal team, because an internal team tends to have a lot more internal pressure, and they know about what's required to sort of, make the budget or get deadlines done and that sort of thing. Whereas our team can approach it more from well, this is the right way to do it, and we will balance the client's needs for getting it done on time with making sure that it's maintainable and usable into the future and it's not going to crash. So getting those best practices has been a very useful thing for many of our clients. In fact, one of our clients asked one of our developers just to come in, not do any code, but just come in for 2 weeks to teach their internal team how to do best practices, how to use Git branching properly and how to make sure that a test suite is working properly and all this sort of stuff. And that turned out very well for them. And they've since then grown their company quite massively because their code has been a lot more stable and been able to expand faster. Another good reason to outsource is focus. So you're paying a premium for outsourced developers, right? And from that viewpoint, we as an outsourced company are very incentivized to keep those developers very focused on what they're doing, because we need them to do the biggest bang to buck to get it done. And it's also that you're paying the developers a lot of money. So you also have a lot of incentive to make sure that they're really focused on the critical things you need to get profitable, as opposed to getting distracted by the latest bug from somewhere in the organization, or we'd really like this logo to be a little bit more blue. You're not necessarily going to put your expensive outsourced developers on these more frivolous requirements. You're going to focus them on, well, how do we get this feature done? And that will relate directly to your bottom line, because then the project's going to end up being stable. It's got the most important features done for the most important number of customers. And then you could either have an in-house developer come in more junior to handle all those other issues that came up, or you can move on to something like Code Care, which can then provide maintenance on a weekly basis or monthly basis to update those things at a lower cost. So focus is important, and it definitely does focus you. I know, I have also paid for development, and I can tell you that I'm very focused about what those developers are doing, because it's expensive and you want to make sure that that happens. The next one is flexibility. And I touched on this a little bit in the cost one, but it comes up that you can go from having one developer on the project to 3, back down to 2, up to 5, back down to 1 or 0. And you can be flexible on when and how you're going to spend that development budget. You can't do this with an in-house team unless you've got multiple projects and the in-house team moves between them. But then what invariably happens is that you need them on both projects at the same time, and then you're back at square one. So the flexibility in having an outsourced team allows you to scale up and scale down. Our development model is primarily focused around this. You can call us and shut down the project next week, and we handle that. But that's up to you. Or we can scale up. And also, the other side of the flexibility is not only on having a resource on the project, but the resource that you might have on the project to begin with might be a mobile developer because you're building a mobile app. But then towards the end of the project, you actually need someone who's a API or systems developer to do all that integration. So as an outsourcing company, we can actually swap that developer out with another developer that is better suited to the next task in the project, or we can add them or whatever. So that makes a big difference. Another one is contingency planning. So having an outsourced team means that there's another company and another group of developers that understand and know about your code base and can maintain it. Doing it with a single staff member in the company obviously has its risks. What if that person leaves or moves on, and that sort of thing. This obviously can be mitigated in many ways. So to be true and to be fair, contingency planning also works in the other direction. You know, you have one company that knows how to run your code base. Well, if that's the case, you've got one outsourced company that knows how to do it. Your contingency planning there should be making sure that that company will do things like, you know, in the terms of use, do they have a clause that says if you stop using their service, that you get immediate access to all of the code base and then that it's yours? And do they have in their terms of use that if they're hosting you and you no longer use them, they give you access to the hosting account so you don't have to go and find another company at a week's notice to make everything run? You know, these are things that we've built into our terms of use to make sure that our clients are comfortable to know that if anything happens to us, they have a legal document which says that the code is theirs and they can get it from whoever is looking after the company should anything happen. Or on the flip side, if they just don't want to use us anymore, they have a legal document saying that we have to give them the code. You know, it's really funny. One of the philosophies at Reinteractive that I've built over the 7 years is make it very easy for a client to leave the company so they never will. And it's panned out. You know, as long as we keep delivering quality code, we keep delivering value for the clients don't leave. Some of our clients have been hosting with us and using our services now for 6 or 7 years, and our client base just keeps growing. So it's beautiful, and that's why this contingency planning, making sure that intellectual property, that hosting servers, all this sort of stuff can be handed back over to the customer at the end of the engagement, and that the correct intellectual property belongs to the correct entity. Very critical point. The next one is a good reason to outsource is freeing internal resources. So if you do have an internal team or you do have an internal project manager, they might not have the scope or capability to work on another project. So this is where outsourcing that group and getting another team to dive into it makes a lot of sense. It can free up that resource. You can keep your internal team focused on the customer support process or fixing existing bugs or upgrading systems that they know they need to handle. And you can get the external team in to come and build the new feature that you need to build. So they're the main 10 reasons to outsource. So the truth, the next question is, well, which one do I do, right? And it's always a hard question, and it's on a case-by-case basis. But on a system that's constantly being upgraded and needs constant feature development, I actually highly recommend you do both. And that might seem counterproductive from a sales point of view for me, but the truth is it's the most efficient way. If you have a system that's constantly having feature upgrades done on it, and those systems need those feature upgrades done for continued viability, then you need to do both. You need to have an in-house team. Even if it's one developer, you need someone internally that can handle that base load of development work, the stuff that just comes in every day from the clients that I clicked on widget X and it didn't quite work. How do I handle it? Your internal developer should work on that. If you don't get many of those, or if you have some other way that you get the software built, you're licensing it or you're working it from somewhere else, well, then maybe you don't need that internal developer and you just need the outsourced team. But if it's a big system, you'll want to look after both because it's the most cost-effective way to do it. And then you can get someone like reinteractive to just dive in and fix stuff. Now, one final thing I do want to say though, there is a word of warning. In outsourcing development work, you absolutely get what you pay for. And one of the things I've seen is some of the cheaper development agencies that offer cheap rates, when you ask them to do something, they'll say yes and they'll just do it. And while that might seem good on the front, the reason you're hiring an outsourced team is that you don't have the internal skills to do what you need done. So if you don't have the internal skills to do what's needed to be done, you might not know that what you're asking for is actually the wrong thing or might be detrimental to your project. Our developers, for example, are trained to say no when appropriate to a client. And they don't just say no. They don't just say, no, I'm not going to do that, obviously. They say, look, thanks for asking me to change the logo from 10 pixels wide to 5,000 pixels wide. I really understand why you want to do that. I can see what problem you're trying to solve. But understand if we do that, it's going to push this stuff out of view, and that's going to make your app harder. So what I recommend is we actually take it from 5 pixels to 50 pixels, and we can fit it up here. And then if the page changes, we'll change the size of it to make it more in frame with the problem that you're trying to solve. So they will say no, but they have to present a better solution or a more appropriate solution that's not going to get you into trouble. So when you are hiring a team, make sure that you know who are the team, where are they based? Some companies have a local representative in the area which sells things, and then as soon as you buy the contract, they flip it over to a outsource company, an international outsource company that then does all the work, and then you're dealing with them, and the person you were dealing with was just a local salesperson. Well, you've got the same IP problems, because if the developers aren't covered under Australian or US or New Zealand or one of those first world country legal systems, then your intellectual property is at risk, to be blunt. So you want to know who the developers are. Make sure you can talk to the developers on a regular basis. You shouldn't ever engage a company where you don't have direct access to the developers, because if you do that, you're going to end up in a situation where you're explaining it to the project manager who understands it somewhat, and then they're explaining it to the developer. And at any point in that chain, you can get a change of requirements or a misunderstanding or a confusion entered into the game. So you want to make sure you're doing daily stand-ups with your team. If you're on active development, that you are communicating what's needed, that the team's communicating back to you, and things are working like that. Obviously, if you're getting your app hosted or doing hosting or something like that, you obviously don't need to speak every day or every month, because once it's set up, it should just run. But make sure that you can get access to the people that do actually work on your system. You want to be able to communicate like that. So there we are at about 40 minutes. It's a bit of an early mark. As we said before, the Confident Software book has been released in 2018. You can sign up at that URL. And if you do, we'll send you a free booklet, Why Ruby on Rails, that we wrote. And I hope that was helpful. And if there are any questions, please go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much for your attentiveness.